We're going to be styling our contact form in this lesson. So let's pick it up from where we stopped. Looking at the current contact page, we're going to repeat the same thing that we did for the books page. Means we are going to copy some of the things and just put somewhere. So right now we can actually copy books.html and then save it as contacts.html. So right here, I want to rename this class, call this contacts, and then inside of here, I'm just going to delete some things. So we're going to use back the text from the old page. So this will be contact details, and then the paragraph will be, please complete the form below. We are happy to hear from you. Okay, so we're going to change this to contact.css. Then we can just create the style sheet now. Copy. This will be contact.css. So we leave that of the container and just delete every other thing for now. Let's do a reload on the browser. Right, so we have the contact page right here. So the next step now is to actually begin building the form. So contact.html, and then here I'm going to close this rule. So what I would do is just get rid of this and then get rid of this. So close this rule here and then come down here, create another dev class rule. And then here we are just going to have a column. This will be dev class column. On a large screen, we want this to be 8. And then on a medium screen, we want this to be 9. So inside of here, we're going to return back the h3 tag that we copied. So that will be for inquiry form. And then the next thing will be the form element. So the first one that we want to create will be for the name. Right, so I'm just going to grab the input tag. And then the next one will be for the email address. So we're still going to have a BRO here. And then I'm going to grab the input tag. And then the last one is going to be the message. Then still going to add the BRO tag. And then I'm going to grab the test area tag. Right, so we have all the components here except the button. So I'm just going to create a button here. So we're going to call this button. Type should be a submit button. The name should be submit. And then the value should also be submit. Okay, so this will be all that we need to do for the HTML. Let's do a reload. Okay, so we have our form right here. You can see that the form is actually not looking that nice, but with CSS, we can actually make this look a lot nicer. So let's go over to contact.css and begin styling the form. So right here, we want to actually target all the input type of text and also the text area. So we can do that in one CSS line. So we can say input, and then we open and close bracket. The type that we're looking for should be equal to text. So input type text. If you come back to contact.html, we have input type text, input type text, right? So we are actually targeting both of these. So we can come back here and put a comma and say we also want to target the text area. So if you have other form elements that you want to target, like you have a select element, you can also include it here by adding a comma and then the name of the specific form element. So the first thing we want to do is to set the width to be 100%. So it should be 100%. We want to give it a padding. Let's make this 11 pixels. And then we are going to also give a border. Let's make this border 1 pixel solid. And then we're going to use the color of the section. This will be triple E. So we want to give the ability to resize this text area vertically. So we can say resize should be vertically. We want to also give margins the button. So let's say this should be 15 pixels. And then we also want to give a top margin. So this will be margin, top. Let's make this 9 pixels. Okay, so remember our box sizing. So this is going to be border box. So lastly, we can use the border radius property to put a radius. So this is going to be a rounded border around. So let's make this 5 pixels. Then let's try to do a reload first. Alright, so you can see that the form is now looking really nice. So a couple of things that we can still do here. We need to also style the button. So let's go back to the CSS. We are going to just target the button element. Alright, so probably if you have more than one buttons on your page, then you may want to assign a CSS class to the button. So like here you can add a class and then let's say btn and then style this class. Alright, if you want to affect a specific button. But now I'm just creating a generic button style rule. So the color should be white. Cursor should be a pointer. So when I move my mouse towards it, it should show the and sign. So this should be a pointer. I want to float my button to the right. So I'm going to say float right. Want to give it a border radius. The same with the form element, input and text area. So this will be 5 pixels. But we don't actually want a border for this button. So border should be none. Okay, so let's do a reload. Right, so you can see the button here right now. So probably need to give some paddings and also maybe change the background color of the button. So let's come back here. Let's give padding. Let's make the top to be 13 pixels. And then right and left could be 20 pixels. Background color. So I'm going to make this 115C 8F. Let's do a reload. Okay, so we have our button nicely styled here. So the last thing that we want to do here is to style the overstate of the button. The overstate is when I move my mouse on top of the button, I want to see some color effect here. Alright, so let's go back again to contact.css. And then here, we could just grab this and then attach the overstate. Okay, so for the overstate, we only want to actually affect the background color. So this will be over. So I want to change the background color to be 506AA7. Alright, let's do a reload. Okay, so once we move our mouse on top of it, you see the color changes. Move our mouse out, it returns. Move it on top, you see the color changes. Alright, so I think there's a bit of spacing here. So what I can do is to actually just remove the bottom margin for this paragraph. So let's see how we can effect that. Right, so let's get back to our HTML and see how we can target that. So we have contact section and then we just have one paragraph. Okay, so we can easily just target it using this class. So we want to say contact a paragraph, margin button should be 0. Okay, so let's put the period here. Do a reload. Okay, so we actually removed a little space there. The final touch I want to give will be for the border here. So if you look closely, you can see that the boss shadow is actually somehow whitish, which is actually different from the other area here. Okay, so I want to try and see if we can make everything blend. So what we can do to actually come back to shed.css and try to increase the opacity here. Let's make it 5. You can see that it's a bit darker now. So when we do a reload, all right, so it's actually blending with the container right now. So before I end this lesson, there's one bug that I saw. I'm going to quickly show you and then we'll fix it. If we move this down to a small screen, you can see that the footer is not fitting in because on a small screen, remember that we set the container width to be 98. And on a large screen, we set it to be 90, which actually fits with the footer. But when the screen is small, then the footer still remains 90. So what we can do is to just add the footer to our query to make it 98 when it is on a small screen. Alright, so let's go to the media query for small screen. Right here where we have the container with a space, and then also target the footer. Save this and then let's do a reload. See if everything works. Okay, so now you see that the footer fits in. So we may also want to maybe style the button to be 100% on a small screen. It depends on how you want this to look. Okay, so I'm just going to style it to be 100% on the small screen. So I'll target the button, then set the width to be 100% on a small screen. So let's do a reload. Okay, so now we have a responsive button. Once the screen is big, it will flow to the right. Screen becomes small, it will be 100% of the entire screen. Right, so you can see that everything still fits in nicely.